Thanks for taking the time to listen to our latest content here on the Blood Red channel. Guy here with just a quick message. Do you want the very latest Liverpool FC news directly into your inbox? Well, then sign up to our daily LFC newsletter, which will bring you the breaking news and big events from around Anfield. To subscribe, just go to bit.ly/LFC newsletter. That's bit.ly/LFC newsletter, or click the link in the description of this podcast and pop in your email address. It really is that simple. That link once more, bit.ly/LFC newsletter. Well, thanks for your time, and on with the podcast.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Well, 15 years on from the greatest Champions League final of all time, we're here to have a look back on exactly how and just when Liverpool did do exactly what they did in Istanbul to see off AC Milan and win their 5th European Cup. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome to the Blood Red channel. We're once again live on YouTube. If you want to give us any of your memories or recollections as we go through, do leave them in the comments section. Joining me to look back on that win then 15 years ago as Liverpool lifted old Big Ears up in the air, Steven Gerrard, the man getting his hands on the trophy, our chief Liverpool writer Ian Doyle, who was out in Istanbul covering the game. Doyle, how are you?
I'm okay, yourself?
Yeah, not so bad. Thank you very much. A man who was, well, we hear not watching this one on VHS tape recorder, Theo Squires. Theo, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. By this time, I've upgraded my technology so we can be a bit more happy with this. Caught the second half of this one.
Yeah, for those who don't get the reference, go back a couple of weeks to when we spoke about the UEFA Cup final in 2001, as Theo had to tape record extra time and watch that one during the extra goal extravaganza the following morning. And Matt Addison, who was about with us in 2005 to watch the Champions League final, a very young and impressionable Red. And Matt, I suppose this game had a massive significance and impact on you as a young lad.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the first season I properly remember supporting Liverpool as a child, and obviously, sort of at that time, you know, when you're that age, you sort of think that those sorts of seasons happen season in, season out, and of course that isn't the case. So yeah, certainly when you look back, you certainly treasure it more than what you did at the time.
Doyle, I suppose it's hard to imagine or hard to sort of think, I know it is for myself, that was now 15 years ago. You, of course, have been covering the Reds all through that time, and what a fantastic journey it was.
Yeah, it's been 15 years ago. It feels like 5 minutes to me. And then you have a think and you go, actually, quite a lot's happened since then. But yeah, I mean, I know we've been doing this series, haven't we, of the road to Istanbul and how Liverpool got there. And that's all part of the story, isn't it? That's what made the final so special, not just what happened on the actual night itself, but everything that was leading up to it. And it was just like the final chapter of a very crazy, strange, unexpected story that, let's be perfectly honest, if you had written that and sent it into Hollywood as a script, but they just go, no, this would never happen. It would never happen. But that's the kind of thing that sport and football in particular can do. There were so many stories around the actual day and the evening of the game that I'm sure we'll touch on, you know, most of them over the next, 20 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah, we've certainly got plenty to go through with it, Theo. And it's one of those words, just the city's name, Istanbul. As soon as you say it, the memories, everything just comes flooding back.
Yeah, you just need to say Istanbul, and I think every Liverpool fan will have a smile on their face. Like, they've had so many good memories over the years, so many triumphs, but I think this one's the most unlikely one. It was the most unexpected one. We think of all the great Liverpool teams of the past. This current Liverpool team under Jurgen Klopp, they're going to be remembered the same way. That first team under Rafa Benitez was not like that at all. And yet they're up there at the same status. They are European champions. And they probably only had, one real world-class player. Granted, Xabi Alonso a bit later on. But yeah, it just shows how much of an impact they made, that they can make this fantastic story when they had no right even getting to the final, never mind coming back from 3-0 down and everything else around it.
Yeah, let's quickly then just go round everyone, just sort of say, when you hear Istanbul, what is the first thing that comes to your mind, the first memory that it conjures up? Matt, what is it for you?
Wow, to pick one is really, really difficult. I suppose it's sort of, to be honest, it's the scenes when they came back for me, I think, for Liverpool City Centre, similar to what we saw last year, of course, the day afterwards when they came back and paraded it around the city. And I suppose for me that would be the one. But I mean, there's an infinite number that you could pick out, and certainly if you look through the photographs that were taken, and certainly Colin Lane from the Echo, the photographer, if you his Twitter and see a few of the things from what he took and sort of his perspective, it adds something new to the experience as well. So definitely check that out. But yeah, there's so many iconic images, not just from that particular night, but from the whole season really.
Doyle, what about yourself?
Do you mean what do I think of when I think of Istanbul?
Yeah. When someone says not the city's name, but when someone says Istanbul in this context, what's the first thing?
Context? Well, it was a lot of hard work, I'll tell you that. I remember still being at the stadium at 3:00 in the morning, thinking, "Are we ever going to get finished here?" Lack of sleep. Also, think just the actual journey getting there, physically trying to get there. I mean, I flew out. I wasn't with the rest of the press at the time because I was actually still in work in the office on the night before the game at 11:00 at night, and then I actually flew out at 7:00 in the morning by Frankfurt, and the flight from Frankfurt to Istanbul, it was absolutely packed with a connecting flight from Dublin, just full of Irish Liverpool fans who most of them didn't have a ticket. They were just going. They just wanted to go and experience it because you've got to bear in mind Liverpool hadn't been to a European Cup final for 20 years at this point. So, and it was because it was so unexpected, and Liverpool were obviously nowhere near winning the Premier League at the time, and they'd gone 15 years without winning the Championship. That this was something new for an entire generation of Liverpool fans, in much the same way that the last couple of years has been for, let's be honest, Theo and Matt's generation. It's something new for them as well. So, yeah, I remember the journey. I remember landing, actually. I landed at the airport where all the Milan fans were sent, and there was absolutely nobody there. And so I phoned up my colleague at the time, who was Andy Hunter, who's now at the Guardian. He was at the Daily Post with me at the time. He'd already gone out there, and I said to him, what should I do? And he says, no, you've got to get up to the stadium right now. And this was, bear in mind, there was about 6 hours before the game starts. He says, you've got to get there right now. Everything's absolutely crazy. We were there last night just for the training, and it was just insane then. And of course, then I ended up taking them else on this very, very long journey to the ground. And you literally saw tons and tons and tons of taxis and cars and coaches and buses it was almost all Liverpool fans just getting up to the stadium. And you saw the snipers in the hills. I'm not sure what they were expecting, but there was an awful lot of a lot of tales like that. And I remember that the taxi driver who gave me a lift from the airport, he got me right up by the ground, which was some going, believe me, so I didn't have to walk that far. And I just gave him a tip. I didn't know how much money I had because I got Turkish lira, just a ridiculous amount. So I gave him it, and then he was like, "Oh, thank you very much, thank you." He was practically getting out and hugging me and kissing me. I think I'd given him about 50 quid tip. So I had absolutely no concept of how much money I'd given him. But so that's happened, and I've not even got to the stadium at this point. So and then funny enough, I bumped into 2 of the people that I used to work with at the time straight away, who'd just gone as fans. But that was the start of a very interesting night, which I'm sure every single fan who's been there has similar tales of. Some of them would drove across Europe for the best part of a week just to get there, because that's what you did when I did go and watch your team. And I know it's the same for most other clubs, but for Liverpool, it's particularly special because they had such a history of being in these competitions in the late finals of the late 70s and early 80s. As I say, for that generation, then this was like, hang on, this is our time now. We can now do what our parents, what their friends, what my uncle or auntie or whatever, people, the stories that they've heard from people who grew up in the 70s and 80s, that they can now live out what stuff that they've only heard.
Yeah, that's the brilliant thing about it as well, is as thousands and thousands of Liverpool fans descended on Istanbul, each has their own little tale and anecdote of what went on over those sort of few days, as you say, whether it be being there, whether it be the game itself, or even sort of afterwards, as Matt's already alluded to, even with the trophy parade. For you, Theo, of course, you'd upgraded from VHS to DVD by this stage.
Yeah, I was watching this one at home. I was allowed to stay up and watch the whole game. I can't really compete with Doyley's stories, understandably, but my memories of it, I think it's just, you remember, obviously, Gerrard lifting the trophy, but it's more the goals because the game itself's a blur. It was such a roller coaster ride. Like, you're so excited. Liverpool in this European Cup final. You never dreamt they'd get there. And then within a minute, they're 1-0 down. And then you remember you're playing AC Milan. You go through that team and it is 10, 11 world-class players. And they've still got, Rui Costa on the bench or players like this. It was such a good squad. And then it becomes 2-0 and Kaka's just incredible. And it's 3. You think, Liverpool could have had a penalty. Was it handball in the build up to that one? And it's like, just don't be 5, just don't be 6. Let's have a bit of respect here. But you still look into that Liverpool bench and you're seeing like Igor Bishka, Antonio Nunes, and then just 6 minutes of madness. I don't think I can remember much of it. It's just the goals. Like, you celebrate in one and then the next one's gone in. You lose your head. It's only when you watch it back, you can really take it in. And for me, it's always the Clive Tilsley commentary. That's always springs to mind when I think of the game. Like Steven Gerrard's head, hello. The European Cup is returning to England and to Anfield. And the commentary when Dudek makes that wonderful save in extra time. It's just moments that you're always going to remember. It's a game that had everything apart from a red card, pretty much. Like Liverpool, had 2 players off injured, all these variety of goals. You had Vladimir Smicer in his last game for the club scoring when he didn't even expect to be in the matchday squad. You could just go through a whole team and pick these tales. It's just an amazing game to look back on.
Yeah, I think as much of it, Matt, you were saying this sort of being the first real season that you remember supporting the Reds. As Doyley's already touched on, so much of it was actually about the journey to the final, and then the final within itself was an unbelievable story as well.
Yeah, literally every step of the way, it was, the underdog coming through and somehow pulling it out of the bag, obviously typified by Steven Gerrard. And of course, the whole thing wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for him. But yeah, as Theo says, it's just story after story after story. And so many different facets of it are just so unbelievable that, as Doyle said before, if you wrote that as a script and sort of, told it to someone who wasn't alive, maybe at the time, maybe they were too young to remember it, they just would not believe that it happened. And, I remember at half time, obviously Liverpool 3-0 down, and my mum said, you might as well go to bed now because, it's over, kind of thing. And, me and my dad sort of, convinced her that, probably I should stay up. And I remember him specifically saying, this might not happen again. Liverpool might not be in a Champions League final again in his lifetime. So he needs to stay up and watch this because, this might not happen again. And of course, 2 years later it did. And obviously last year it did as well. But I think that just underlines the fact that Liverpool were such underdogs at the time as well, that, Liverpool fans, if you'd have asked anyone at the start of that season, do you think you'll get to a Champions League final? Not a chance any of them would have betted on that at all. So, as I say, it just underlines the underdog status that Liverpool had, and game after game after game, they just kept on winning. And yeah, eventually the final was the most sort of underdog moment of them all, particularly at half time. But yeah, even thinking about it now, it's hard to believe that something that unbelievable actually happened.
And I suppose that halftime team talk, the halftime antics that went on in the dressing room, Doyle, are something that have become something within themselves of just how big a moment it was. You, of course, of those watching on YouTube can see the book behind you, Didi Haman's book. He, a central figure during what went on at halftime. And it is quite a crazy tale, really, isn't it?
I mean, it is. I mean, it's interesting because when you were there, you just didn't think Liverpool were going to have any sense of a comeback. As Theo said, everyone who was there was thinking, this best not be 5 or 6. And of course, when you hear some of the players saying it, was saying exactly the same thing. So of course, we weren't aware of what was going on at half time in the dressing rooms. But what we were aware of is what was happening outside. And, we've heard the stories of there's a couple of people, certainly more than a handful of people, who said they've had enough of this, we're going. But about halfway through the half-time period, then the crowd started singing "You Never Walk Alone," but it was a bit different. It wasn't like upbeat. It was more like a lament or something like that. So we just looked at each other and went, they're probably feeling a little bit sorry for themselves. They spent all this money to get here, and now this has just happened. So, yeah, I mean, that if you want to talk about football briefly, the fact that Haman wasn't playing in the first instance was a surprise to everybody. Like, what's he doing here? Can't you see that Kaka's going to do this, and this is going to happen in the midfield? And of course, that's what happened. And then he had to make the substitution with Smicer coming on for Kuhl instead of Haman, and stayed with it. And you got to remember, it was only 1-0 at that time. Kuhl was still in the game. I know they ended up winning it, but they was, what I mean? They were still in the game at 1-0. And it was only just before half time where Milan scored those 2 goals. So, yeah, when Haman comes out for the second half, you just thought, well, they're quite clearly desperate not to lose 5 or 6-0. And then within about 15 minutes, it was 3-3. And So, speaking from a journalistic point of view, I've been asked this question before, whereby, was it really difficult covering that game? Well, it's actually no, because all the goals were scored in such a short amount of time, and there was still half an hour to go of normal time. So it didn't involve any rewrites or anything. It was just like, okay, what's just happened there? And as Theo said, by the time you're thinking, oh, that's a goal, and they've scored again, and then it's like, oh, it's a penalty. So you kind of got caught in it in that sense. But then after that, anyone who's covered games as well knows that penalty shootouts can be fairly straightforward in the sense you can just get things ready. They've won or they've lost. It's simple as that. And there's always like the goalkeeper is the hero, or somebody's missed the villain kind of thing. So from a working point of view, that wasn't too difficult. But it was only like days and days and days afterwards that you realised what actually happened. Because for a lot of people, the fans, and for me as well, actually, you were either at the game or you were at the parade. There was very few people who were at both because it was almost a physical impossibility. There were some flights that left Istanbul on the Sunday morning, not Sunday, Thursday, wasn't it? It was a Wednesday-Thursday game. So on the Thursday morning to get back in time. But for most people, it was like, basically, it's like the team had two celebrations, the one at the stadium and then the one around the city, which I know was a lot like what happened last year.
Yeah, I remember actually speaking, you mentioned the Road to Istanbul series, speaking to Stephen Warnock, and he, like Chris Kirkland, I think Neil Mellor's another one who didn't make the celebrations back in Liverpool after making it back. But just quickly with yourself, Doyle, you're mentioning there just in terms of the experience reporting on the game. This, of course, before Twitter as well. So I was going to say to you, I imagine you were there furiously typing away, kept looking back up and things were changing. But it wasn't like you were live documenting it on social media as you do these days.
No, but don't forget, we still had a newspaper. I wasn't on the match report duty. Andy Hunter was on the match report. I was on the comment piece. So you still had to file stuff for on the final whistle. So I was still expected to do 1,000 words, which for anybody who doesn't understand how many words we normally do, that's quite a lot. Low to Theo, that's normally his first 2 powers. So sorry, Theo. But yeah, so it's quite a lot to turn around. But because everything happened in such a short amount of time, it was a long way to go. You did find, you find yourself sometimes getting carried away with things or getting caught up in the event. And I think that's one of the occasions where you are. I mean, everybody, there was the Liverpool fans and there was the Milan fans, but then there was the neutral fans, of which there were few of because Liverpool fans bought up nearly all of the neutral tickets. But then even in the press box, there would have been Liverpool leaning people, AC Milan leading people, even the ones who kind of were reasonably neutral. They were getting caught up in it because it was just ridiculous what was going on. And probably the one that got most reaction was Dudek's save from Shevchenko in extra time, because I think it's like the world slowed down because it's right by. We were at the left-hand side of where the cameras were. We were at the left-hand side of them in the big stand at the Atatürk, which, by the way, is just in the middle of nowhere, and it literally is just like a moonscape. And it was actually quite cold, to be honest, for the game, because it didn't start till 9:45, I think, local time, so it wasn't particularly warm, but it was on the left-hand side where Dudek made that save, so we were quite close to it. So when the header comes in, I think, oh, it's a good save, but he's gone, oh, hang on, what's happened there? And you could see people getting it in the press box, going hands on their heads, going, what on earth just happened there? People who weren't normally particularly fussed. So that's the kind of game it was where people were getting really into it. And I think, looking back, the minute Serginho misses the first penalty, you were just thinking Liverpool have won because everything had just gone their way. And never at any point during that penalty shootout did I think Liverpool would get beat, which isn't always the case for, when you watch teams and you just think this is happening, it has to happen. That was the feeling. And I think in some ways that was the feeling amongst the Milan players as well. They were still, the whole through extra time, because they wouldn't say they battered Liverpool, but they were definitely the better team. They had the better chances. Can you name a chance Liverpool had in extra time? Can't really think of one. I think there was a Reece shot that went miles over. That was about it. So, Milan did the best that they could do in terms of the talent, but you only have to look at what some of the players have said since that in their heads that they'd gone. And the minute the penalties missed by Serginho, Liverpool are going to win it. Just a matter of who would score the winning penalty or who, as it turns out, would miss.
Yeah, you mentioned that Dudek save. Isaac Red 10 on YouTube's got in touch with us and said, oh, Dudek save, best moment of the final. Ashley Johnson says, Stevie G header, what a header. Theo, I just wondered the moment for you when you thought actually Liverpool are going to do this in terms of completing the comeback or actually, in fact, getting their hands on the trophy.
It's probably Dudek save, the one in extra time, just because granted Liverpool had got back in the game, but it was still square pegs in round holes. Like, you can say it's tactical genius from Raffle, whatever you want, but he wanted to take off Jimmy Traore, didn't he? But Steve Finnan was injured, and then it was this weird makeshift formation where you've got Jamie Carragher as a right back and a third centre back at the same time, covering that whole flank. And then an extra time, you got Steven Gerrard going as like this right wing back to stop Serginho, and it was just, it wasn't a way a football team should be able to win a game. It was just, oh, this is the best we've got. We're going to have to try and make it work. And AC Milan, you can just go through that team, and it is 11 world-class players. They should have won that game. They should win any game they're in. You just get these special teams every so often. So to get to that close to penalties, you knew Liverpool had a chance just because they've got such a good record in penalty shootouts. And if you're an AC Milan player, you know they'd have had that mental fertility then that they've somehow got into extra time and they've got to penalties. Because you thought in that 90 minutes, Liverpool got it back to 3-0. It'd have only taken one AC Milan goal for their heads to drop again. Just they had that balance, they had the control, they had that belief, momentum from it. It would have taken the next goal, would have swung it either way. But as soon as Dudek makes that amazing save from Shevchenko, you look at his face there, Shevchenko's face, you just couldn't believe he's not scored. It's like 99 times out of 100, that's a goal. And then you see that exact same look again when he runs up to take his penalty. He's not scoring this. His head's gone. And Dudek stands tall, makes the save. It's great. It's all the emotions you can feel out of it. And you think the stories Dudek's had in his Liverpool career, he's always had his highs and his lows. But to manage to turn it on when it mattered most, it's why he's always going to have this special place in Liverpool fans' hearts. It's quite funny when you think, looking back, that was his last game as Liverpool's first choice goalkeeper. Rafa was not going to let him keep his place out of sentimentality. Within a few weeks, Pepe Reina was sold. I'm signed, sorry.
Yeah, and of course, one of three goalkeepers that was used along the way with Chris Kirkland and Scott Carson during that run. Peter Hauser's got in touch and says, I watched it the other day and looked at our lineup against AC Milan. Then, given that they were 3-0 up and what happened in the second half, well, it was supernatural. Will it happen again? No, that was destiny. And Jason Irish Red says, we're watching it on the Irish TV channel RTE, and when Dudek made the double save, the commentator George Hamilton shouted, that's it, Liverpool have won the cup. And I suppose as significant as winning the cup, Matt, was the fact that in winning the cup, Steven Gerrard, rather belatedly, albeit, nailed his colours to the mast and remained a Liverpool player forevermore.
Yeah, absolutely. It was obviously a huge thing going into the final, as far as I remember it. That was a big topic of conversation, and obviously, you know, it goes without saying the huge influence that Steven Gerrard had that season and in the seasons that followed as well. And obviously, Liverpool's fan base at the time, obviously, you know, when you've got a player as good as that and as important as that, they obviously wanted him to stay. But there was obviously a sort of almost a trepidation that he might go and join one of Liverpool's rivals. Obviously, Chelsea at the time were the big spending powers and a team that Liverpool had come up against so many times. And it just, you know, looking back, it makes you think, you know, what if Liverpool hadn't have come back? What if they'd got 2 goals back, but they'd lost 3-2? It changes the entire course of the next few years for Liverpool. And who knows what would have happened if, you know, not just for Liverpool as well. If he'd have gone to Chelsea, what would he have done there? And I know that, you know, since he said that whatever he could have achieved elsewhere, it wouldn't have meant anything compared to what he did for Liverpool. But, you know, it just goes to show how different things could have been. And yeah, I think obviously winning the trophy was the big thing for Liverpool, but possibly a close second was that he stuck around for the years to come after that as well.
It was winning the trophy that nearly prompted him to leave, to be honest, because the season before, Chelsea had tried to sign him and he hadn't gone. And then after that Champions League final, in the press conference directly after the game, he came in with the trophy with Benitez, and he's obviously asked about his future, and he says, how can I leave after a night like this? And within about 8 weeks, I think it was, then the story came out that, yeah, he was leaving for Chelsea. I think Chelsea, I can't remember the number, I think it was about £36 million, which it seems a lot now, you know, 15 years ago. Imagine how much that was actually worth. And it turned out, you know, obviously we know he changed his mind, but part of the reason is that he wanted a new contract, and Liverpool basically put it on the back burner because they just assumed that he was going to sign. And of course, Gerrard, where a lot of his career is based on, not insecurity, but he certainly needs to feel as though he's wanted somewhere, which he's been fairly honest about in his autobiography and the interviews that he's done with me as well. So he said this, and he was thinking, well, hang on, do Liverpool actually want to keep me here? Why aren't they? Why I've got one club like Chelsea making a massive play for me and it's manager Mourinho, and Benitez doesn't seem to be, okay, we've won the Champions League, but where's the club going? And why aren't they coming in and saying, look, we need to sign this right now, straight away? So there was a bit of mixed messages. No, obviously in the end he decided to stay. So I think in a way, you're right to say that you would wonder what would have happened whether he'd been swayed more easily towards going towards Chelsea had Liverpool not won. Because obviously that got Liverpool in the Champions League as well. They'd finished outside the top four that year. Everton finished in fourth. But the whole fallout from it was an example of where Liverpool they nearly missed the opportunity to sign a contract. Famously, the club shop was shut the following day. There was a huge commercial opportunity which they didn't grasp, and that kind of showed at the time that Liverpool perhaps were a club that, for all the talk of, we're great, they've won the Champions League now, we're back at the top tier, they weren't really. I mean, they finished something like 37 points behind Chelsea or something stupid like that. It was a lot of points behind Chelsea in the Premier League table. I mean, the following year they won the FA Cup and finished, I think, was it third, I think it was. And then Champions League final the following year after that. So there was progress then. Of course, they finished second in 2009. But that was in the backdrop of Hicks and Gillette and all of that. So to say that 2005 was kind of the reason why it's so special is because, and it's so unexpected, is because it was so out of place for an awful lot of what was happening around the club at that time. And I think you're right. I think it was Theo said that the kind of players, you looked at the AC Milan team and you were thinking, well, look at these players. These are almost all great players, apart from John Dal Thompson, who I can't stand and he's rubbish, by the way. And Liverpool's players.
Except for the penalty, albeit.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. He had to go and score his penalty, didn't he? I was fuming at that. But you look at Liverpool's players, you've got the likes of Jimmy Traore, even Luis Garcia, players like that who, by their own admission, they're not the greatest players that's ever played for Liverpool, but they will always have a place in the heart to Liverpool fans, and they will always be, if not so much legends, but they'll be heroes because of what happened and the fact that in some ways they represented what the city of Liverpool's all about. They may not be the greatest, but they all stick together and look what they've achieved, and they've done it against the odds when nobody expected them to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, Theo, just in terms of like what Doyle says there and about Steven Gerrard staying and everything like that, without wanting to overdo it, do we put too much significance into that match, or really was it one of the sort of key games that actually enabled Liverpool to stay at an elite level as a club? Because albeit it's a giant club, a giant fan base, but even if you look at the opposition that night today, AC Milan, they've fallen a long way in the last few years, and the road back to getting to the heights they once scaled look an awful long way off right now, whereas winning that Champions League final in 2005 enabled Liverpool to get in the Champions League a couple of years later, again get in the Champions League final, sign a player like Fernando Torres. I suppose it's all about the building blocks and the wheels being set in motion, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Because if you look at the whole season, if you rewind to the summer before, Gerard Houllier gone, and you think Liverpool, much of their thinking at the start of the decade, the millennium, was trying to get back to closing the gap on Manchester United and Arsenal. And Gerard Houllier was a huge part of that. It was his project to try and get Liverpool back to being champions. They finished second in 2002. He has his heart attack and it drops off. And they sort of lost their way, didn't they? You have Michael Owen going to Real Madrid, star player at the time. He was on the bench against Graz for Rafa's first game, not allowed to play because they didn't want him to be cup-tied and sell him for even less. And they stumble through the group stages. Like on paper, you've got a group of Monaco, Deportivo La Coruña, and Olympiacos. You're rubbing your hands with glee. Like you're thinking, oh, that's it, we're in the knockout stages. But apart from they beat Monaco and they really struggled through the rest of them. And it was only Gerrard's wonderful goal against Olympiacos that got them through. And then you think, oh, we're just going to enjoy the ride because we're not going to be out here long. You get Bayer Leverkusen, you think, oh, we might get to quarterfinals. But then that Juventus team, like AC Milan, it's 11 world-class players. That Chelsea team, that's probably Mourinho's best Chelsea team. And they still progressed, they got through. And it will just make players around the continent at the time think, maybe there is something about this manager. Maybe there's something about these players. Like he is doing this with this quality. What can he do next quality up? And we always say every year how important getting into the Champions League is for clubs, for the finances and everything. It's more important now. Back then, if Liverpool had missed out on the Champions League, they hadn't won it, they hadn't qualified, who's to say when they could have got back into it again? just because that springboard of getting in 2005, 2006, granted, it wasn't the strongest signings we've seen from Rafa. They weren't the worst by any means, but like, you think Peter Crouch, Bolo Zenden, Pepe Reina, great, good players, but they're not that next level up. But it took Liverpool to that next level where they could compete more with those teams, the English teams in the Premier League. They compete more with European teams, and then it let them stand to take that next step. Because arguably, it was winning in Istanbul that got Hicks and Gillette through the door in the first place. Yeah, we all know how badly that fell apart, but that's what got Fernando Torres in, and that got them to the next level again. And Liverpool have had all these European memories with fans, journalists have been covered and all that. And if we hadn't had that, 10 years later, could you see Jurgen Klopp turning up? Could you see Liverpool springboarding again? Who's to say they've just been mid-table fodder? It's because they've got those memories and they've got these special players that have managed to keep them within the top elite clubs, and they've just managed to claw it back. And now, for the first time in 30 years, they're at the very top table, looking down on everyone else.
Yeah, amazing to think, as Doyle said before, Matt, that prior to this, it had been 20 years since Liverpool had been in the European Cup final. Of course, they've been in 3 more since Istanbul.
Yeah, it's even more amazing, really, when you think it was Rafa Benitez's first season. He's come in and he's organised that group of players, as we've discussed before. You know, they weren't the most gifted and talented group of players, but it was that determination and that mentality. And I know you spoke to Liverpool's physio, Dave Galley, from that season, and he, said something very, very similar. It was, as much to do with, obviously individual brilliance from Steven Gerrard at certain moments of that season, but it was to do with that group mentality, that sort of togetherness, never give up. You only have to look at Jamie Carragher, the sort of pain that he was in with his cramp and that sort of thing, but he just kept going. He just bulldozed through it and carried on playing and playing and playing. And in the end, they got the reward. So it was obviously an incredible achievement, but it comes back to that mentality, and it's obviously something that Jurgen Klopp is very keen on these days, the mentality giants and that sort of thing. It was exactly the same back then with that group of players. They made each other better. They were inspired by one incredible, brilliant player. The rest of them were nowhere near his level, but certainly they were a level above what would have been if they weren't together as a group and they weren't inspired by Steven Gerrard. So yeah, the fact that it was Rafa's first season and he managed to achieve that was incredible. But yeah, as we've discussed, the level of players was not a level of player that you would expect to go and win the Champions League, and it just made it that little bit more special, I think.
Yeah, certainly. Likes of Dave Galley, Jimmy Traore, Didi Hamann, Luis Garcia and Rafa Benitez, nonetheless, have all been speaking with the Liverpool Echo. So if you want more of an Istanbul fix, head to the Liverpool Echo website and you will certainly find more there. Well, to finish us off then, to wrap us up for the last 10 minutes or so, we're going to switch our attention to the Bundesliga once here on the Blood Red podcast, as everybody seems to be doing, talking about German football right now. And the reason we're going to do so is because of one central transfer target that the Reds are supposedly looking into signing, scoring a hat-trick at the weekend, Doyle. And Timo Werner, he doesn't seem to have a quiet weekend. He seems to be doing something all the time, and the links just continue to persist.
Well, he probably did something all the time, but we weren't paying any attention because there was Premier League football. So, he's probably timed it right in that sense, that he's made people sit up and take notice because they've had no other choice, because there's no other football, basically. So, no, he's the links won't go away, because Liverpool, obviously, Jurgen Klopp he's a fan of his. The fact that Werner's come out and several times said he loves Liverpool. Well, he loves the way Liverpool play, and he would love the opportunity to work with Jurgen Klopp. Suggests he quite fancies a move. I mean, let's be honest. We don't know, because nobody knows in terms of what's going to happen over the next few weeks and months with the transfer markets, whether clubs want to spend big on players. There'll be some that probably might take the chance, but even Manchester United last week, what was it announced? Was it 28 million pounds loss over the first quarter of the year? And that's with only a little bit involving the what's happening at the moment with coronavirus. So there's been another couple of months on top of that. So I think that was an early warning for everybody. But I think it's just a question of whether Klopp sanctions going for him, because it's clear that the player wants to come, and it's ultimately going to come down to what the manager wants. Because I think if Liverpool have shown in the past that they're quite happy to back FSG are quite happy to back Klopp, and he's quite sensible over what he wants. He doesn't come out and say, look, I want to spend £100 million on player X, Y, and Z. He does prefer, the younger, not so much the younger players, but the players that he knows he can work with and players he can improve, because he's proven that with every single player that he's bought. Even the likes of Sadio Mane, Mohamed Salah, Roberto Firmino, all very good players, but they've become even better playing for Liverpool. And part of that is because of Klopp, and we can go through all the others like Wijnaldum and possibly only Van Dijk's the one where he came fully formed, and Alisson Becker actually, to be fair. So there's the pair of them. And of course, what did Liverpool do? They spent an absolute fortune on the pair of them. So are Liverpool going to spend £70 million on Werner? I don't think so. But if he became available for a lot less money and Liverpool thought, well, this is now the time, and there are other teams looking at perhaps signing him, then perhaps Klopp and FSG would be persuaded to make a move. But until then, it's just going to be rumoured interest, and the fact that so many Liverpool fans are now watching him, it can only strengthen his case in terms of he can turn around and say, well, all the fans want me to join, but then any player could say that, couldn't they? So I'm not sure that's going to make too much of a difference. But at least it's giving fans an opportunity to see a player who could ultimately, whether it's this year or next year, end up at Liverpool, and whether or not they feel as though he's somebody that could improve the team.
Yeah, there seemed to be a different space this one though, Theo, in terms of certainly the Bundesliga players that Liverpool were reportedly interested in, Jadon Sancho and Kai Havertz, another two. But this one seems to be a bit more concrete in terms of just how many rumblings you're hearing of it. Of course, we've been doing these kind of things over video conference, I think, for months now. And Raphael Honigstein, the German football expert, speaking with BT Sport, has said that Klopp and Werner have actually had a virtual meeting, and that obviously the way that Werner's contract is structured with the release clauses, it would be a deal that wouldn't be too complicated to finalise, and perhaps in a normal time would have been done sort of April, May, before the end of a season. But now might be something that's pushed back towards August or September, he says. So it does seem as though there is actually sort of talks going on with this.
Well, the contract Timo Werner signed with Leipzig last summer, it was pretty much the end game of getting him a move away from Leipzig. He wanted his move to Bayern Munich. They wanted him to stay tight and leave on a free agent. That didn't make Leipzig very happy. So they came to the best agreement that would suit Leipzig and Timo Werner. But it's still got these release clauses in it for him to ultimately get his move one day. And that's why it's different to Kai Havertz. It's different to Jadon Sancho. Because when you're talking about them potentially going, before all this happens, you're saying that's going to be 100 million plus for either of those players. Whereas the release clause, the reports are saying is about half of that for Timo Werner. And he does seem like the sort of player that would suit Liverpool, that would fit in. Like, it's very telling that he is coming out and he's so vocal about wanting to play for Jurgen Klopp. When you say compare it to, say, Havertz, who was asked about his speculation about his future, and he basically refused to say it, saying he's focused on the season with Leverkusen. But watching Werner at the weekend, what struck me is the variety in his goals as well. Like, he looks like he could fit any role in that Liverpool front three. In the first game back in the Bundesliga, he started on this left-hand side, cutting inside, so that Sadio Mane role, but he was still roaming all over, which is basically what Roberto Firmino does. And he was more of a false nine yesterday. But you look at his goals. First one, his time just run into the box perfectly. First time finish across the keeper. Second one, it's a really, really good team goal. He's involved heavily in the build-up, and then he's in the right place at the right time to get the finish. And the third one, he's one-on-one and chips the keeper. You can see Sadio Mane doing it. You can see Salah, you can see Firmino doing that. He's like almost a combination of all three. So you can definitely see why there's interest on Liverpool's part to potentially bring him in, because he would suit the role. And granted, there's going to be more attention on him now because Bundesliga football is the only league going on. But I think it's quite telling when you look at his numbers this season, because he's 28? He's coming up to the 30 goal mark now. And you think that's decent. Most strikers, 30 goals in a season. You're very happy with that. He's not had that in 2020. Only 4 or 5 goals before these last couple of weeks have been in 2020, which is, funnily enough, since he started talking about wanting to get the move to Liverpool. So you think, I know he's had his critics over in Germany, that he's let his head get turned. He's wanting off already, and that's why his form's dropped. And now all of a sudden, everyone's looking at the Bundesliga. It's the only European league, major league going underway, and he's turning on the form again. A little reminder to Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool, perhaps. But you're going to want to pay this release clause. If you want to sign me, I'm going to have my suitors, and I'm showing how good a player I actually am.
Well, Gary Paul's got in touch with us on YouTube. He's got a number of questions and opinions to get off his chest. It says, when was the last time we spent some money in the transfer window? It's not down to what Klopp wants. It's if FSG will pay up. We spent a fortune, he says, that time when Liverpool brought in Van Dijk and Alisson because we sold Coutinho first. Well, Matt, last week you spoke with football finance expert Kieran Maguire. You've been speaking to the RB Salzburg coach Jesse Marsch this week, a very exciting interview that we'll have on the Blood Red channel for you on Tuesday afternoon. But effectively, Matt, certainly from your chat with Kieran Maguire, he was telling you that actually Liverpool, if they did really want to complete what would look like a £52 million deal, they would have the finances available.
Yeah, it was an interesting chat with him, and the sort of suggestion and his thoughts on the situation were that, Liverpool could find a way to structure the deal perhaps that, would suit both parties. But, just in terms of the release clause and that sort of thing, I think, it is almost in Leipzig's interest to let Timo Werner move Liverpool at some stage, whether that's summer or at another point in the future, because, it is the Red Bull group and that sort of conglomerate of clubs. It is their model to buy these players, develop them and move them on. And that I think is, inevitably going to be the case with Timo Werner at some point. So, I'd be surprised if something didn't happen at some stage, whether that, of course, is this summer, who knows? Just, in terms of the FSG point, I think you've got to be very careful what you wish for. I don't think Liverpool will overspend or go silly in the transfer market, certainly this summer, more than any other summer. But, they have shown that when Jurgen Klopp has wanted players, they have given him money. They have done the right thing at the right time. And, as Ian said before, if Timo Werner is absolutely set on Liverpool, Liverpool are absolutely set on him. If the price is right, they will get it done at some stage. But, Liverpool, as much as Kieran Maguire said that there is possibly a way for Liverpool to get this deal done, he did also say, of course, that they won't do it whilst taking any risks, because Liverpool are 25 points clear at the top of the Premier League. If it's going to put them into potential financial uncertainty at some point down the line, it just simply is not worth the risk at this. So, look, they've got all of the details. They know how good a player he is. They know how much he'll cost and his wages, his agent's fees and that sort of thing. It's just a case of weighing it up and making sure that a sensible decision is made, because we've seen that with every single other player that Liverpool have brought in or sold. It's always been the right player at the right time for the right price. And look, there's no real reason to think that Timo Werner will be any different.
No, Werner Watch will continue on Blood Red. I am certain of that. Seems to be the new buzzword rather than Felipe Coutinho. Well, it's been great talking about Werner and having a trip down memory lane to talk about Istanbul. That's it from us here on the Blood Red podcast for this Monday edition. As I say, keep an eye out for Matt's exclusive interview with the RB Salzburg coach Jesse Marsch, which will be with you on Tuesday afternoon across all of our Blood Red channels. Until next time, though, thanks for your time and your company. Bye for now.